morning. Welcome to all of you. And we can go ahead and get started. We'll ask for the recognition of who's here and go ahead and begin the meeting.
Great, thank you. This is Shannon Rice, recording secretary, taking roll. Chair Corbett.
Here.
Director Mercurio.
Here.
Director Rosario.
Here.
Assistant General Manager Deborah Ocker.
Here.
And Assistant Finance Officer Deborah Spalding.
Okay, so
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. Starting a little late, 11:09. And good morning. We have our first presenter. And the first item is pension trust update. Good morning.
Sorry, Director Corbett, before we get started, can I just read the Brown Act
Oh, yes,
information?
that's fine.
Thank you. This meeting is held pursuant to the Brown Act. We are providing live video and audio streaming. Members of the public wishing to make a public comment can do so one of the following ways: live in person or via the Zoom meeting, by submitting an email, or by leaving a voicemail. This information is noted on the agenda located on the Park District's website, evparks.org. If there are no questions about the meeting procedures, we can begin.
Thank you very much for presenting that. And we do have our first item on the agenda to present the pension trust update. Good morning.
Hi, I'm Deborah Spalding, Assistant Finance Officer. And I'm just going to get our presentation pulled up here. All right. So this is our annual report on the Park District's Pension Trust. And I'm going to give you a brief overview of the Pension Trust. And then we have Dennis Yu here from PARS, and he's going to provide some more detailed information. And we may be able to patch in Andrew Brown, our investment advisor. We're working on that, so you may or may not hear from him. But if not, Dennis will provide the information on the investment portion. So I'm going to give you some history of CalPERS, which is what our pension trust is set up to support, and also our miscellaneous plan. So CalPERS, you probably all know, is the largest U.S. public pension fund, and it has about 2 million members across the state of California. Going back in time to 1998, when the stock market was doing really well, CalPERS actually was up to 138% funded. And at that time, various agencies made decisions to expand the retirement benefits for members, which seemed like it would work at the time because the plan was 138% funded. Then there was this dot-com bubble bursting and the Great Recession, and suddenly the plan was only 61% funded. So then the governor stepped in, and many other people stepped in as well, and PEPRA, Public Employee Pension Reform Act, was implemented, which implemented lower retirement rates for newer members, and also put various caps on retirement plans, and implemented some strategies to help the CalPERS plan become better funded. And so those strategies have worked. And the miscellaneous plan, our miscellaneous plan, which is for all of the AFSCME members and for management members, is now at 80% funded status. And as the plan has gotten more solid, CalPERS has taken more steps to de-risk the plan, which means having safer investments that have a lower volatility. That also can mean a lower return. So some recent returns for CalPERS, they had losses of 6.1% in 21 and 22, and just saw a recent press release that their returns for 22-23 were preliminarily looking like 5.8%. which is good. However, their expected return is 6.8%, so it's still a little bit below that. As of our most recent actuarial study, the funded status of the miscellaneous plan was at 71%. And so what this means for the Park District is that we have this unfunded actuarial liability called the UAL, and it's an amount we need to pay for those losses that have occurred in the past. So the UAL payment is going to increase. And so that's kind of what we've set up our pension trust for, is to deal with this lack of stability, all these ups and downs. So in 2017, we adopted a new Section 115 trust, this pension trust, providing stability, diversification, allows us to smooth these rate increases, because actually our rates are supposed to start coming down in the next few years. So this is really just to get us over this hump where the rates are going up. By the end of 2023, we'll have contributed 11 million to the trust, and the earnings as of June 2023 were approximately a million, a little under a million. We have begun to draw down from the pension trust. In this past fiscal year, we drew down 2 million to pay for that UAL amount, and then we're going to do that again in 2023, and expect to again in 2024. As this is an informational item, so there's no action required, and I'm now going to turn it over to Dennis, who's going to provide you some additional information about PARS, Section 115 trusts in general, and our investment earnings. Right, thank you.
Welcome, Dennis.
Morning. Madam Chairperson, members of the committee, again, my name is Dennis Yu, Executive Vice President with PARS. I'm pleased to present the annual review of the PARS Section 115 Trust Program. And actually, all right. And I'm also joined via Zoom with Andrew Brown, who is the district's investment manager for the program. And so I will go ahead and start with this presentation. As a quick reminder, the Section 115 Trust Program that your district implemented is actually overseen by 3 different companies. The company I represent is PARS. We're the company that helps set up the trust and perform all the ongoing plan administrative and compliance services. All the assets are held in trust at US Bank. So anytime the district sends contributions or receives a distribution, it comes from US Bank. And lastly, the firm that Andrew Brown worked for is Highmark Capital Management, and they are the investment manager. So that's the firm where the district provides your investment guidance or risk tolerance level to Highmark, and then they invest the assets appropriately. So just a real quick background on the Section 115 Trust Program. So many public agencies use 115 Trust programs to pre-fund their employee benefit liabilities, such as retiree healthcare and pension liabilities. So your district has hired PARS to help you address your CalPERS liability. Or trust fund does have a private letter ruling from the IRS. So it does deem that the trust is actually tax exempt, so that there's no capital gains taxes or any tax issues with regards to this program. The investments are actually governed by a different government code section than what your district's general fund has to abide by. So it's Government Code 53216 is the government code that the PARS Trust uses, and that allows the district to actually include some equity exposure within the trust investments. And lastly, the district does have the ability to pull funds out of the trust fund to help offset any CalPERS expenses. And as you've seen in the past, that was actually recently done. So a quick reminder of why districts do use this type of trust fund. So primarily, districts use this to basically retain local control over these pension assets. So as opposed to sending the money straight to CalPERS, the district retains the assets and has complete control over the timing and usage and the investment of those planned investments. And as you'll see, the investments are invested much more conservatively than how CalPERS invests those assets. Ms. Spalding did provide a presentation on your district's CalPERS funded status. And so the one thing I just did want to add upon it is the fact that because of the fact that CalPERS, they've not hit their intended discount rate of return 2 years in a row, they've actually fallen short. That ultimately will cause upward pressure on, and will actually lower your funded ratio and will cause upward pressure on contribution rates. So that's just something to look out for in the future by virtue of not hitting that discount rate of return requirement. A quick snapshot summary of the trust as a whole. This trust was established back in 2017. The general manager is designated as a plan administrator, so she would have the ability to make any changes to the investments or authorize any contributions or distributions from the trust fund. In total, over the past 6 years or so, the district has put in about $10.6 million into the trust fund, has pulled out $2 million in disbursements. During that time frame, the district has earned approximately $955,000 of interest or investment earnings during that time frame. And as of June 30th, the district had approximately a little bit more than $9.5 million in assets in the trust. As of yesterday's market close, that's probably up about $100,000 or so. That means the month of July, for the first 26 days, the investments are positive. And then the next slide does show the history of the contributions. So the district put in that $10.6 million over a 6-year time frame. And you can see the disbursements did not occur until the prior fiscal year, in the 22-23 year, with that $2 million distribution. And then there is the likelihood of another disbursement that will come out of the trust in this fiscal year. Okay. So with that, I will then turn it over to Andrew, if it's possible to actually bring him onto this meeting.
Fingers crossed. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, good deal.
Welcome.
If we do go down over the next 4 to 5 days of the July month, we're going to blame Dennis Yu for jinxing it a second ago. Hey, it's good to be in front of everybody, and I apologize for coming in live on Zoom. It was certainly my intention to be there in person and really stroll down memory lane, because I was the portfolio manager back in day one, which really was 2017, where sitting down with staff, we came up with this game plan for 115 trust investing. And when working with staff, and we kind of got a flavor of it a second ago in Dennis's slide, where he shows, the first 5 or 6 years, contributions, no distributions. But then right around now, this fiscal year, the plan was to begin a modest drawdown phase, maybe putting a little bit into the plan, but having more of a drawdown phase. And so over this period of time, the district staff, Highmark, PARS, we positioned a portfolio that we did not want to encounter too much volatility. And, in theory, I think we developed one, but of course, everybody on this call would say, well, what about last year? Last year was certainly a unique period of time, 2022, where I know we're not running a 60-40 portfolio, but if this was a 60-40 portfolio, it would have been the third worst environment for a 60% stock, 40% bond portfolio over the last 55 years. So, but to the district's credit, we haven't wavered in terms of our initial policy stance. And that's allowed us to benefit a little bit with respect to the rebound that we've seen in the market. The presentation has disappeared from my screen. How about there? Can everybody? I see Dennis.
Andrew, we wanted to make sure that the board could see you on camera, so we pulled the presentation down, but we'll bring it right back up.
Yeah, your photo.
I know you have 2 slides.
Well, I appreciate the cameo. Yeah.
We can still see you. It's just a smaller photo.
Got it. And in this, so much as these are typically annual reviews, updates, I'm going to go through the 1-year column, which is the sort of the column, well, third over from the left. Yeah, you'll see black colored font on this investment report. The black colored font would represent investment performance for our plan. For a variety of investment segments that we invest in. The lighter brown shaded font would be some type of representative benchmark. One of the things that we saw in 2022 was the Fed aggressively raising rates. And in fact, breaking news, 15 minutes ago, the Fed raised rates 25 basis points again. So the Fed, in the span of 16 months, have gone from 0% interest rates to now 5.25%. One of the positives, one of the positive dynamics of that is our money market yields are very attractive. Right now, our money market investments for the cash balances that I invest in, over 5%. And you can get a flavor there. The last 1 year, we are looking at a 3.39% rate of return on our cash. So good news there. The bad news is that, interest rate up, bond prices down. And that third row, our fixed income return, a plus 0.52%. A little bit ahead of the benchmark of minus 0.94%. But certainly 2022 was probably, it was the worst bond market in over 50 years. And we are beginning to see a little bit of positive activity from the bond market, if for no other reasons than right now, any fresh money going into bonds is investing in bonds that are yielding 5.5%, 6%. So going forward, what we've seen in the first 6 months of this year, and that would be the column over, 2.76%. I feel very good about showing you that. And also, I feel very good about fixed income in the future. So as we sort of see a gradual wind down of plan assets, I think that the 60, 65, 70% that's invested in fixed income will do very well for the plan and do what bonds should be normally doing for multi-asset portfolios. But last 12 months, plus 0.5%. And I know I'm bearing the lead here, so thank you for indulging me. The real story for the last 12 months, 16.43% on the equity line item. And really across almost all categories, we're looking at mid-teen, high-teen level type of returns. Large cap 19.5%, mid cap 15.02%, small cap 12.69%, and then international also at a shade over 12%. So strong rally, predominantly over the last 3 quarters that we've seen in the equity markets across all categories that we invest in, until we get to REITs, real estate equities. It is the lagging category, minus 2.7% over the last 12 months. Real estate equities are facing sort of the double whammy. Rising interest rate environment hurts them from a funding cost standpoint. For those REITs that are heavily levered that have to refinance, they're refinancing at higher yields. And plus also there's just the dynamic of typically like private investors who invest in REITs like the income that REITs, because they throw off a very nice income stream. Investors have a whole lot of other options in investing in riskier real estate equities to get income these days. So yeah, that's sort of the outlier in the negative way, minus 2.7%. If we put it all together, 5.01% over the last 12 months has been our return. And so, I did phrase it specifically a second ago. We were climbing out of the hole that 2022 created, but I think we'll get there. I think we'll get there. And I certainly didn't come into today's meeting with any type of different recommendation for the district's 115 plan in terms of an asset allocation policy. Next page, please. Yeah, in the interest of time, I'll just sort of hit the main highlights with our investment policy. We call it moderately conservative. That's the name of it. And it just reflects an asset allocation policy that you can sort of see in the far right-hand column where the top segment there, equities at the top of the page, policy ranges between 20 and 40%. Right now, we are at a 29% clip. Fixed income there in the middle of the page is 50 to 80%. So at any period of time, at least half of the plan assets are going to be invested in bonds, and it could get as high as 80%. Right now, we are at 67% for those investments in fixed income, and then cash money markets at a 4% level. Next page, please.
Andrew, I think that's the last page.
Oh, that's it? Okay, yeah. So in the interest of time, I tried to be very brief and high level, but I'm more than happy to answer any question at all, high level or detail oriented.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Any questions? Please go ahead.
Thank you. In my mind, I think this is probably one of the best ideas that we've come forward with in order to stabilize the our retirement payments and keep our commitments to our employees. But I'm just curious, with the recent bank failures, how secure are the funds that are in the trust? And who covers that?
How secure are the investments? A couple ways I can answer that. If we were to go back to February 28th, which would be the month prior to Silicon Valley Bank, First Republic Bank, having their issues in the middle of March, and you were to say a different question, you were to say, well, how much exposure do we have to those two banks and Credit Suisse and what was it, Synchrony or Symphony?
Mhm.
I forget the other one, but you know, he said, Andrew, how much exposure do we have in these portfolios to those banks? I would say moderately conservative, 0.09% of plan assets. So it wasn't nothing, but you know, small paper cut. So that was the direct exposure that we had to it. Now, of course, there's a knock-on effect, right? You know, if these banks you know, have issues, it can reverberate through the economy. So certainly we're keeping a mindful eye as the Fed continues to raise rates, and that can lead to possibly other issues with other banks out there. Hopefully, certainly not the fifth largest bank in the United States of America, U.S. Bank, our new parent company. But yeah, it's something we're keeping a watchful, mindful eye on.
One other note I'd like to add is that assets in a trust, employee benefits trust fund, are actually legally segregated from bank assets. So let's say that the unthinkable happens and U.S. Bank does go bankrupt, which again, we're not anticipating that happening anytime soon. The assets are actually protected from creditors, so that it simply, PARS would simply go out and hire another trustee, but those assets would remain with the district's trust program.
Okay, that's good to hear. And then regarding the real estate investments, does that cover the full spectrum? Is it commercial as well as a residence?
Not a whole lot of residential. So the real estate, we invest in a Vanguard REIT ETF, so a real estate index fund. There's probably about 10 to 12 industries, sub-industries of real estate. You have cell phone towers, because the cell phones need to put land on their, you know, towers on the land. So they'll lease space on office buildings. There is office. There's a big headwind there. There's industrial. So all the stuff that we buy off Amazon and eBay and whatnot, all those goods need to be housed somewhere. So industrial REITs are a popular REIT industry. There's college dormitory REITs. There's strip centers. There's malls. There's multifamily apartments. And then of course there's a smaller segment related to residential. So it's multi-diversified, but a whole lot of subcategories are facing headwinds with respect to REIT investing. Right now, plan exposure is 0.5% of plan assets. Arguably, the board could say, well, it might have been better to have 0%, and that probably would be a true statement. But it's not an area that we're emphasizing right now. But the quicker answer to your question is it's more than just residential, much more broad.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the questions. Any additional questions? All right. Thank you very much for the presentation. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Good news overall. All right. Thank you. Our next item is measure AA and WW bond information and an update. After every item we have, we always are open to public comments. Any public comments on this item? All right, thank you. Go to the next item then, measure AAWW bond information. Hello.
Good afternoon, members of the Finance Committee. I'm Deborah Ocker, the Assistant General Manager of Finance and Management Services and CFO for the Park District. At the same time I'm talking, I'm trying to pull up the presentation. Here we go. Let's see. So today we are going to cover our bond initiatives, Measure AA and Measure WW. The purpose of this report is to provide a status update and an overview of the activities related to the Park District's capital finance program. Today we're focusing on these two bond initiatives, and at our last meeting, you might recall, we talked about Measure CC and Measure FF. So we're kind of rounding out our capital finance program. Also, the grants program will come to the full board in September. So this is just an information item, and it's a little bit of a continuation of some of the work that we did at the board study sessions. So I'll just start by saying that we are very fortunate and thankful to the voters to support these measures. Alameda County and Contra Costa County voters approved two bond measures, one in 1988 and again 20 years later in 2008, providing a total of $725 million in capital funds to the Park District. These funds have been used to leverage other monies, other grants, other people's money. And we've been able to leverage at the rate from like 25% to 70% over the years of these initiatives. And the projects will support acquisition of open space, development of parks, trails, and restoration work. So again, we're very thankful to the board for the strong fiscal policies that they've adopted that contribute to the park's high bond rating. The Park District currently holds the highest credit rating available, a AAA rating from both Standard & Poor's and Moody's. This strong rating helps the district to obtain the lowest possible interest rate when we issue debt. And that is what we're allowed to do by these voter authorizations. The voters say you can issue bonds, which are kind of like investments, and we will pay, you can tax us to pay the debt service on these bonds so that you can do these capital projects. So when we put together these measures, we said the Park District covers 2 counties. Let's make sure that we try to spread out the allocation of these types of funds and projects equitably. And so in both Measure AA and in Measure WW, we have an equitable distribution of assets through the program when they were put together with big project lists. So you can see here is the metro area map. This comes from our master plan, like we were talking about way back in the 80s. It was originally developed. And I'll go through a little more detail of the metro map when we talk about Measure WW. Also, it's important to note that when we did do this first initiative in 1988, the district did not include this South Alameda County area called Murray Township. That was not part of the district, so it is not included in the tax levy or the project list for either Measure AA or Measure WW. You can see we do have parks out there, and we can contribute other grant funds and bond funds, or other grant funds and general funds for these projects. So now I will turn to Measure AA. This measure, like I said, was approved by the voters in 1988. The program is 98% complete, which is great news. Originally, when this was put together, it was $225 million of capital bonds. And then 25% of that was set aside for a local grant program. So that was about $56 million for local grants. The local grant component offered up revenue for agencies throughout our district, cities, and special park districts. And that program is closed, long since been closed. The remaining balance on these allocations is $4.9 million. And those are primarily in the area of acquisition. So the majority of all the funds have been appropriated, spent on projects, closed out, but we still have $4.9 million available for acquisition. Those monies are held in taxable accounts, which basically means we've kind of eliminated the time limit. When you issue tax exempt bonds, which is what we're doing for Measure WW, you have a window of 4 to 5 years, which you're supposed to spend the funds in order to remain tax exempt. So these monies have been sitting there for quite a while, you can see, and if there is any interest earned on them, they're considered taxable. The interest earned on these funds is pretty minimal, and they will go back into the program if there is any net or interest earned. So during the board workshops, there was a question of how were these funds originally allocated? It was a very long time ago. The original allocation here, you can see, it was split by metro area by population. So when you look back at that metro map, the population is where we came up with these percentages. So the South had 32% of the distribution, the West had 38%, and the Diablo Metro was 30%. Throughout that program, as I look back at the history, there were many adjustments, moving funds around for different project reasons. And the way it is right now on our books, the adjusted allocation areas are very, very similar, only changing a little tiny bit between the South and the Diablo Metro. So the allocations, even though there was movement between parks and things like that to get projects done timely, I think it's similar to what the original plan was. That was one of the questions asked at a board study session. So then just looking at these charts, in Measure AA, the acquisition funds were held very separately from the development funds. There wasn't really language in the ordinance that provided the board the discretion to move back and forth between these two categories. In Measure WW, that's slightly different. But here you can see we have spent down, again, the majority of the acquisition funds and the majority of the development funds in Measure AA. So when it does get down to be that little bit of remaining balances here on this chart, and most of this information is provided in your packet. Most of these charts and tables are provided in your packet material. So as you look at the remaining balances, the 4.9 million, these are the separate metro areas where things are broken down. And again, at the study session, we talked about how previously board said, if these balances get below 150,000, that's not a lot to do anything with. So let's just dump it into a consolidated metro account. And so you can see on each of these charts, there's at the bottom, there's a consolidated metro account. And so at the board study session, we said, we are getting down to the very end of this program. Can we, staff recommends, moving all of these remaining allocation areas into the consolidated metro area, especially because these are mainly acquisition funds. Acquiring anything for these amounts is not even possible. It would just be money that we're leveraging against other funds, and it would provide more flexibility for the district. And it is important for us to close this program. So when I look back at the history also, I can tell you that these 10 remaining allocation areas have not been accessed much in the last, I want to say, since 2011. They've just been sitting there, which to me, and when you meet with the land department, there's not a lot of opportunities specifically in these defined areas. So that's another reason to move them into consolidated metro accounts. So when we were at the study session, we posed that question, and we felt that there was consensus from the board members to move each of these separate line items that was on the previous slide into something that looks like this, the consolidated balances. And therefore, the board would get to deliberate and make decisions when we present budgets or board material on spending these amounts within that metro. So that's kind of where we were. And I think before I leave the Measure AA section, which this is the last slide on that, I'll just pause and see if there are any questions specifically about that before I go to Measure WW. Yes.
Any questions? I have a question. Any questions? I do appreciate the fact that we're putting the funding together so it can be used in other areas where it might be more needed. How do we, though, determine that we are, sharing that funding by area? There are some parts of the district, of course, that have much more land and other projects to work on than others, and others that have some smaller projects that have been being worked on for many, many years, and they just haven't quite caught up with some of the newer ones.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we ensure that we're being fair with those dollars?
Well, I believe by grouping them into these metro areas, we still are creating that equitable distribution throughout the district as a whole. Now, remember, we still have Measure WW funds that are out there. So
Yes.
This is just closing out this program. So I know we track everything. We will continue to track things by allocation area so that we can go back and look. But it's really up to the board's discretion, and has been, as this program has seen a lot of adjustments, that if there was an opportunity for an acquisition and it was in any of these metros, you would be able to approve a budget that would utilize these funds, even if it was in a different allocation area than it was originally set to. So you still have discretion. You can still say no, use a different funding source. Staff would recommend that we use these first, that these are the funds that we draw on first in any acquisition opportunity, of course, unless it's someone else's money within our own funds. So
are these funds available to, we have projects that people have been looking at and saying, maybe we should do that one, or we started and it would just expand part of a project. How equalized is brand new projects in case someone sees something all of a sudden that might be available for purchase in one of the areas or districts that have much less in the way of projects than some of the others?
yeah, remember, these are for acquisition only.
Yes.
So if there are acquisition opportunities, it may be that you want to save these funds for that acquisition opportunity. If there is no acquisition funding in WW, maybe there's equal acquisition funding for this opportunity in Measure WW. So this wouldn't have to be held, right? We would say that prioritize spending this down first and then go to that. But like I said, it is up to the board of directors to approve those types of appropriations. They all come before the board before they are actually put into a project. And so those decisions, I think, would be made based on what opportunities are available.
But as I mentioned, there are some areas where they might be brand new, come to our attention, versus ones that have been sitting around for a while and are in an area that has more projects than another. So I just want to make sure we have the opportunity to have those discussions and be fair with that funding. And I know that is what we do, but I just encourage that. So thank you.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I'm really happy that the board consolidated these funds so that we can use them. And you're right. These funds have been here for a long time, and we need to zero out that account, and whatever opportunities that come out, I think this will give us some extra leverage. So thank you all for keeping track of everything, and I think looking forward to some acquisition. So thank you.
I agree with that. Do we have any opportunities for having a meeting for just discussion on what's out there, what's new, what's possible to be chosen? Have we thought of having any kind of meeting or in one of our committees just to address this issue?
Well, the funding here, as I mentioned, is related to land acquisition.
Right.
So I can check with the ASD division and the land department to see what they have planned for interacting with the board.
So having this as an agenda item to discuss, perhaps. I think that'd be a good idea. Thank you.
Okay, ready for Measure WW? All right. So again, thanks to the voters, we came back and requested a $500 million capital bond authorization that was approved in 2008. We kept our promise to the voters to keep the tax rate below, the additional tax levy below $10 per 100,000 of assessed valuation. I think we've gotten close to that, but our records show that we haven't exceeded that. It is a promise, but the bond covenants say if for some reason the debt service requires greater than that, you are required to make sure you have enough payments. But we have a little bit of control over that by the way we establish our debt service schedules when we issue new debt. So just as an example of that, we just issued new debt last February in 2022. Before that, the tax rate was $2 per 100,000. After we issued those bonds, it went up to $5 or $5.80. So it fluctuates based on what the debt requirements are, how much principal and interest is due. When you issue new bonds, you're kind of layering on top of each other. So there's a couple of years where there's additional cost. So again, in Measure WW, the allocation of funds was set up by metro area to be equitably balanced by metro area. We're about 15 years into this program and 41% of the funds have been appropriated. Oh, and I don't want to forget to mention that we have issued bonds in 2017, or in 2009, 2013, 2017, and 2022. In 2017 and 2022, $30 million worth of those bonds were in certified green bonds. So that was a new program that we put forward. We're very proud of it. We didn't really gain financially from putting that forward, but we did work to get basically certified green bonds, working with a third party to say that our restoration projects, our green transportation projects, and our land acquisition were definitely eligible for the green bond certification. And we'll continue to do that going forward. So again, here are the allocation. In the first chart is based on the census data that was updated as of 2020. So the ordinance for Measure WW says every time there's a new census, U.S. Census, you can use those population numbers and update the balance of what the allocation will be. So it was just slightly changed by about 2% increase in the Diablo metro, just because that's the area that had more growth in population, and a small 1% or less than 1% in the other two metro areas. And we're going to accommodate that growth with any interest earned would be designated to go towards the Diablo area. That's kind of the practice that we put in place of how to manage that. And then the second pie chart is what we've spent or appropriated to date. So in the West, you can see it has a little bit higher of a percentage. In some cases, that's because we've been able to partner with the HCP over the years. So we had more opportunities for spending in there. And then also on a future chart, you'll see just kind of where the West has had a lot of trail projects. So let's see here. So when you get to these charts here, they're broken down into acquisition and development charts. Also, I forgot to mention that the local grant program also continued in Measure WW. That was $125 million that was set aside for the local grant program, where we contribute funds to all the other agencies. We are 99% spent in that. I think there's only a few agencies that have projects that are still in process and they haven't completed. And there's only 2 agencies that haven't put in, still have remaining balances that they haven't put in a project for. So very close to closing out that program. Like in the past, we've come to the board to say, you know, we don't really want to, we want to put an end date. So we'll encourage people to spend this money, but we don't want to cheat anybody out of funds. So we may come back to you after the end of next year if we want to extend this program. So right now, I think we've extended it to the end of 2024. And if there's still remaining funds, we might come and say, let's just extend it a little bit more so that everybody can utilize those funds that are set aside. So as of now, like I mentioned, we've issued $300 million in bonds, and we've appropriated about $150 million for projects, and also spent the $125 million for the local grant program. So we're making progress, but we still have a lot to go. On the acquisition side, we've spent about $83 million, and on the development side, $66.5 million. And you can see here on this chart what I mentioned before, the Diablo area, the blue is a little bit higher in some ways because of our partnership with the HCP and having more opportunities. And in the West, on the development side, with a lot of our great projects for San Francisco Bay Trail projects. So in Measure WW, the ordinance was written slightly, or here we put in a contingency amount. So a reserve of 7%, which originally was $26.25 million. The amount that's remaining right now is $20.8 million. This reserve can be used for any allocation area, any metro. It can be used for acquisition or development. And as we talked about at the board study session, we said we want to keep this as broad as the ordinance allows. So not putting any kind of artificial constraints on the spending of this money. Again, the use of these reserve funds would come to the board for deliberation and approval anytime staff was recommending a project that would utilize these funds. And then also, the ordinance allows for the project list to be reviewed and modified even on an annual basis. And I think since I've been here, we haven't come forward to request a full review of the project list, and staff would like to do that. So we talked about that at the study session, that we will work internally with staff and go through and be able to report out what we've completed, what we feel is going to be very much a challenge or has already been done with someone else's money. So we don't need those funds, and we will bring back a revised proposed project list that we can move forward on and have the board review and approve. So that is what our plan is. And I think, let's see, just a few photos of projects that are going on with Measure WW funds. I think you saw this chart in our land study session. The light green area are parks that have had Measure WW funding contributing to land acquisition. So all throughout the district, you can see there has been the use of Measure WW funds in our parklands. And then this past year, I know you're very familiar with the Finley Ranch Road property that was a total purchase price of $12.1 million. There was $3.3 million of Measure WW. It was 60% grant funded, this acquisition, I just wanted to point out. So 40% district funds, which was Measure AA and Measure WW, and 60% grants. Then also we had a Harvey Ranch property that was acquired over the last period of time. And then some other development projects that had Measure WW funding included Doolittle Trail, Coyote Hills Well, also Tidewater, which I didn't get the picture in there for. Tidewater has also WW funding for it. Roberts Pool, as you're familiar with, that also is 45% bonds and about 43% grants. So we're always constantly using these funds for leveraging other grants. The Coyote Hills Restoration Project is also a very large project that we have going on. And then finally, I have McCosker Creek, which has been a multi-year project with over $10 million in grants and $5 million of our bond funds. So that concludes our update. If you have any questions on WW or anything else, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you very much. We have a question. Go ahead.
Thank you very much for that. I never tire of hearing this topic. It's very encouraging, and it's great that we've been given this flexibility by the voters to, have these funds. So I'm really wondering, and since I've been on the PA, I was on the PAC for a long, long time. I've really been hearing about this for a long time. And I just recall hearing for years about these agencies that don't respond to our offer of free money. So I suspect that it's real small agencies that really don't have the wherewithal to manage a project, or they just don't do that sort of thing. Maybe, I don't know. But do we have plans to meet with them before we do anything in one way or the other? I mean, to kind of get behind the numbers and find out, why, do we have bad breath or whatever? Why don't you want our money? I think that'd be worthwhile because maybe we don't extend the date if there's not going to be any promise of something happening.
Director Mercurio, we have been very engaged with all the agencies, and the remaining funds in some ways are the larger agencies that had a lot of money allocated in this, and they have completed many projects, and they're kind of on their last projects.
Okay.
So I think the city of Fremont is still working on projects. The city of Oakland is still working on projects, and the other ones, even the smaller agency, have proposed projects. So we are meeting with them regularly. There's been an announcement that, we're getting close to closing the program. So we are doing those communications. And when Katie Hornbeck, our grants manager, comes back to the full board, be happy to have you ask questions. She'll have that full list for you in the board material, so you can see which agencies still have funding remaining.
I guess what I'm really trying to zero in on, though, are the ones that haven't done anything.
There aren't any that haven't done anything.
Okay. All right. Okay. So,
yes.
So it really is just remainders of stuff that's happened already. Okay. That's
where we are.
Never forget what I said.
A couple years ago. So you are recalling that it was, we had to knock on their door a few times.
Yeah, we did that.
Yes.
That's what we should be doing. Okay. The other question, or not question, comment, is that near the end of your presentation, you had you indicated that there's going to be an effort to kind of redo the project list, and I think that's a great idea. So I look forward to seeing that. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up with John. I know with the city of Oakland, they're looking at a project, the Caldecott Trail extension, and it's almost pie in the sky. And talking with with Sean Dugan, that the property we're trying to acquire is held by people that don't live in the United States and hard to get hold of, and it may not come to pass. And so I've been working with the city and the Commission of Aging. We're trying to see if we can't use that money for a multi-generational play area, or multi-generational exercise play area for one of the senior centers. And hopefully those internal discussions with certain board members there, or council members, will that will happen soon. So, but yeah, they're just struggling to move pieces around, and this goes towards also reviewing projects. I mean, looking at projects and see if are they doable and are they not, and can we defer them to a possible another extension of WW in the future. So it's kind of been a living document. I know as a supervisor at Redwood, I had to look at my projects that I submitted and say, that's not going to happen. So we drop things from time to time, but it's a good practice. And but I really appreciate the board learning its lessons from AA and giving themselves and putting it in the measure, and the public acknowledging that when we get towards the end, consolidating that money and putting it through a big project makes a lot of sense. So thank you for all the detail. This is a great report.
Thank you.
Any other comments? I would just say, I also appreciate the fact all this work has been put together to see what is out there that's available. And we'll always think of something good to use it for, I'm sure. So thank you very much.
There are many, many needs within the Park District, and this
Oh,
is
yes.
certainly not enough to cover them. So the leveraging of the funds and the use of grant funds is really important.
Thank you. So we ready for the next item? Oh, are any comments, public comments on this item? Okay, we'll go on to the next item. That is the second quarter 2023 general fund and other governmental funds financial reports.
Good afternoon, Deborah Ocker. I'm here to present the second quarter of the 2023 General Fund and Other Governmental Funds Financial Report. Again, the General Fund is the main operating fund of the district, with most staff and operating activities recorded there. As of June 30th, you can see that our revenues and expenditures are within budget and they are comparable to the prior year. The board operating guidelines do require that we report out quarterly. So this is our report to the Finance Committee, and it will go on to the Board of Directors for acceptance. So here on this chart, you can see for the general fund, the revenues, which include transfers in, are $201.7 million, and we are at about 48% received in revenue. And on the expenditure side, which includes transfers out, we have a budget of $227.3 million, and we're about 48% expended as of June 30th. I just want to also highlight the net use of fund balance, the 25.5 million there on the bottom of the chart. As you may recall, when we adopted this year's budget, we kind of we tweaked the way of doing business to be in line with best practices, and we purposely budgeted the use of fund balance rather than coming to the board throughout the year for one-time appropriations. So in the past, we would adopt our annual budget, and then we would come back throughout the year for project appropriations, for mid-year appropriations, and then you were just looking at those things one at a time rather than having the opportunity to look at everything holistically that was planned for the whole calendar year. So this year is a big shift, and we're just kind of utilizing those one-time funds in this budget. I don't think you'll see that same use of fund balance as great in future budgets, since it's our first year with that shift to the new best practice. So a little more detail on the general fund here, and this is in your packet. On the revenue side, you can see that the property taxes are the greatest revenue source for the district. These are secured and unsecured and all those other categories of property tax. The budget was projected for about a 7% 7.6% growth from the prior year's budget. And you can see that we're pretty close to being on target at June 30th. We're certainly similar to the amount received as of the prior year where we were with our budget. The next couple of categories look like they are a little bit shy of target. I believe the charges for services are low, mainly due to the major storms that were happening all throughout the first quarter of the year, where we had park closures. We didn't have many people reserving things. Campgrounds were closed. And so that really, I think, reduced our revenue in that period of time. As you know, the summer is the biggest, busiest time. So I think we'll be going gangbusters in the next several months. On the expenditure side, you can see that salaries and benefits, the personnel cost for our district is our largest expense. And we have about 43% of budget complete. Again, we do hire more seasonal staff and temporary staff in the summer. So the next quarter will have greater expenditures in that category than in the first part of the year. Supplies and services also will, I think in the report, in the description, I talk about how the actual cash going out the door is a little low, but when you include encumbrances, we're on target. So just to make sure I explain what encumbrances are, those are when you've made an obligation to pay for something. So we've ordered vehicles, we just haven't received them and paid for them. We've issued a contract for services, but the services haven't all been completed. So when you look, including encumbrances, we are on target for meeting our budgeted expenditures. So those are the key items in the general fund revenues and expenditures. And then we look at our other governmental funds, which are grouped into different categories. Our special revenues are where there's an outside agency telling us how to spend the money. So we have our LLDs, or lighting and landscaping districts, our zones of benefit, which are also a special assessment that we receive for small areas within the park district, our community facilities districts, are in there as well. I apologize for all the acronyms. And then our Measure Local WW Local Grant Program is part of our special revenue funds, and a few others. And they are pretty much 29% of budget in the revenue side and 35% of budget on the expenditure side, similar to prior years. And then the majority of our projects are multi-year projects. So the variances are very hard to look at on a calendar year basis. But when you include expenditures and encumbrances, we're about 59% of budget. On the revenue side of projects, a lot of those come in as grant funds after we've spent the money, and then we bill for reimbursement on the grants. So they come in a little bit afterwards. Our debt service funds are where our tax levy comes in to pay for our principal and interest on our WW bonds. And then internal service funds are our workers' compensation fund, general liability, employee benefits, our major infrastructure repair and replacement funds, where there's a lot of maintenance activity, and our major equipment fund, which includes our fleet. Those are all considered internal service funds, and they are on target right now. So that concludes our quarterly update. Here we are asking for the Finance Committee to review and make a recommendation for favorable consideration to the Board of Directors.
Thank you very much for that positive presentation. Questions, anyone? Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I have no questions about the report. I just wanted to point out, I appreciate all the work that's gone into this. I just wanted to point out in the, and I really appreciate the footnotes, which is why I noticed that in our handouts, I mean, I see footnotes that goes up to 19, but I don't see the footnotes in, it stops at 11.
Thank you, Director Rosario. Yes, there was a printing problem and we did repost it on the website. I guess I need to give you all a revised copy of that. So the footnotes do continue through number 19, and we'll provide that to you.
Great.
It's posted correctly on the website.
No, I really appreciate those.
Thank you for noticing that.
I missed it.
Thank you. I think we'd all like to have one of those. Thank
Yeah.
you.
We will get that for you.
And then I think that's it. I appreciate the amount of detail and the amount of work that goes into these reports. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, comments? All right. I don't have any other questions. I asked them earlier, so I think I'm okay. So with that, if there's no additional questions, we can have a motion on this item.
So moved to recommendations to the full board.
Yes, moved by Director Rosario,
Second?
seconded by Director Mercurio. Sorry, my mouth's having a problem. We have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Shannon Rice, Recording Secretary, calling roll call vote. Chair Corbett,
Aye.
Director Mercurio.
Aye.
And Director Rosario.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. All
Thank
three
you.
voted for it, so that's supported. Thank you. That's it for that item, unless there's any other questions from board members. If not, we can go to that next item, which is public comments. I mean, if there's any public comments on that last item and public comments from anyone. Yes, please come forward. Welcome.
My name is Meadow Darcy, and I am from AFSCME Local 2428. I'm the chief steward, and I also looked for the footnotes. I did get a copy from Connie, so thank you, Connie. On the footnotes of number 16, I know you don't have them in front of you, but it does say MAST expenditures are low in salaries due to staff vacancies. It also says ASD expenditures are low in salaries due to staff vacancies. It also says public safety expenditures are low due in salaries due to staff vacancies. And I wanted to point out that these are the three areas where we see the most contracting out. The Mass Department, as you remember, I've been asking for the paving analysis report because we spend millions of dollars to contract out paving every year, and we have done so for, I don't know, 5 to 10 years. So what I had asked before was that we sort of maybe take a step back and look at, if we are contracting out this work repeatedly over and over again, that perhaps it's time to look at in-house staff to complete that work. But from my understanding, the paving analysis report is still not ready after 3 years of asking for it. So not really sure where that is. ASD, we're also seeing a lot of contracting out of stewardship work. Because if you notice in the board material, it'll often say we do not have the staff capability to handle this work. So again, that tells me that, especially if it's something that happens on a regular basis, that maybe we should be looking at staffing. And I'm also concerned about the fire department and our OCF program that has only 10 OCFs, which are on-call firefighters, normally has about 40. So I'm very concerned that it's been that way for a very long time. We haven't had an academy. And we also just found out about the district's plans to expand Civicor to do more of this work. So what's happening is we are shutting down youth employment programs that are diverse and help reach out to different people. And we are now diverting attention to contracting out this work to a group that we don't have the same type of relationship with. So I'm really concerned about contracting out. We try to bring it to the board's attention, but it would be great if we could see more of an effort placed on doing some analysis of that staff work and where more staffing is needed, especially if we understand that contracting out happens. You know, there's times when we have, things that happen unexpectedly, quickly. However, when we find that there's patterns, I don't believe there's anybody actually stepping back and looking at the bigger picture of, we're spending a lot of contract money here. Maybe we need another person in stewardship. Maybe we need more firefighters. Maybe we need, a paving crew. So that's all my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments.
We have one comment from Kelly Abreu on the Zoom.
Okay, very good.
Go ahead,
Kelly.
Kelly.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, with regards to the youth employment program, it wasn't so much the termination of the program that struck me was that somehow, like what, 20 or 30 people got up and complained about the termination, but that's not the problem. It was that you had an employee who was getting transferred and told that their program was being discontinued or whatever. They had no idea what was happening. They'd been deep in this work for 9 years. And then the entire union had no idea what was going on. And then all of a sudden, a new program of restructuring, a transferring, whatever it is, happened. And nobody knew about it until after the 30 people had spoken up. That shows a lack of communications, and that's a very serious issue in organizations. You know, corporations, organizations, large bureaucracies. That's a very bad problem in the bureaucracies. Second thing, the declaration of emergency on January 17th. You know, did you know that the staff was supposed to be reporting back to you and keeping you updated on that? I haven't. I've been digging deep. I got instructions for how to dig, using search functions, and I haven't found any reports at all on that declaration of emergency. By the way, also that declaration of emergency is supposed to be terminated by your board at the soonest possible date. I haven't found that either. And finally, all this accounting that we just went through. This is so detailed, so rigorous, so well structured, this is formalized. These people know how to count, they know how to write reports, they know how to track things and all these things. And it gives you the impression that this is how the district operates. But when the district wants to move helicopters from Hayward to Livermore, that's being done, hiding behind the skirts. And maybe that's a sexist statement. Hiding behind a security smoke screen, pretending like that's a security move, and you can't discuss why you're moving it. What are the costs? What are the service needs of your population? Where are the helicopters being deployed now? Why are they being moved? What are the implications for travel times and all that kind of rigorous sort of management, studies and analyses, operations research, accounting, cost forecasts, all that kind of stuff that these accountants know how to do. None of that. And it's very upsetting that you can make these kind of decisions without putting in the grunt work, the sharp pencils and the accountings and the managements and all that stuff. It ain't happening. And I've been, it's a little bit of a concern. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. All right, any other comments at this meeting? None. Okay, very good. All right, any comments from our board members?
Let's make one.
Yes, please go ahead.
I just want to respond to a couple of to public comments. I too am awaiting the paving analysis, and if you listened in on the our board priority workshop or study session, I'm advocating for a second roads and trails crew. Hopefully that'll come to pass. And then I'm also concerned about the low OCF firefighter count. Having been an OCF, I know when we got down to 20, we were very, very stretched when we had to respond to multiple fires. I'm really concerned about meeting our commitments that we promised to make in terms of using our fire department to cover not just fuel mitigation, but also responses to actual fires. And so those are on my list, and I appreciate everyone keeping an eye on us, and we'll be following up with all of that. So thank you.
Thank you very much, too. This is Finance Committee, so obviously these issues are important. All issues are important for Finance Committee. But would there be an opportunity to have a discussion about some of your questions at some of the other committees that might, look at fire and safety and those sorts of things? What do you think? I'm asking
I think
preference.
I think operations committee is probably the best. I think the paving analysis is supposed to come to operations committee, and there's no reason why we can't include the on-call firefighters at operations as well.
Okay. So is that a specific request for operations to take a look at these items? Yes? Everybody agree with that? Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Any other questions, comments? Yes.
I'll just, thank you, Director Corbett. I'll just mention that we're going to take a break in August, so there will be no finance committee meetings. And then we adjusted the September meeting date so that there's not too much time. So the next finance committee is September 6th at 11 a.m.
All right, thank you. My only comments would be thank you for a very good presentation and giving us the education on the many things we are doing, where we're spending money, where we have needs, and just what's going on out there. All right, thank you all very much. With that, we can adjourn the meeting. Thank you.